The rain lashed against the windshield as Nova Delgado slammed her foot down on the accelerator. She was already a good 20 minutes behind schedule for her shift at Café Luna, and the dire warnings her manager had delivered the previous week rang in her ears. "One more time, Nova, and you're done." But she simply couldn't abandon him. The man lay bleeding on the cold, unforgiving asphalt. His sleek, expensive car mangled around the unyielding trunk of a massive oak tree. His eyes fluttered, barely registering consciousness as she knelt beside him in the downpour. "Stay with me," she had pleaded, her hands pressing firmly against the deep gash on his forehead, her uniform rapidly becoming soaked as she anxiously awaited the wail of the approaching ambulance sirens. He had looked at her then, this stranger with the piercing steel-gray eyes and a face sculpted like a cover model's, and something palpable had shifted in the very air between them, something undeniably dangerous. Now, as she finally navigated her beat-up sedan into the cafe's parking lot, Nova's stomach dropped like a lead weight. Through the rain-streaked windows, she could clearly see her manager's furious expression. His arms crossed tightly over his chest as he waited, radiating impatience. She thought of Ethan, sound asleep in Mrs. Rodriguez's cramped apartment, utterly dependent on her meager paycheck for absolutely everything: rent, food, and crucially, his life-saving asthma medication. She also couldn't shake the memory of the man's whispered, "Thank you," as the paramedics carefully loaded him onto the stretcher, the fleeting touch of his fingers against hers. She had absolutely no idea at that moment that saving Damian Stone's life would irrevocably alter the course of everything she thought she knew. That the most formidable and dangerous man in Los Angeles now knew her name and, even more shockingly, that by the following day, she would find herself standing inside his opulent mansion, being presented with a job offer that had the potential to either completely save her or utterly destroy her. Nova's hands trembled visibly as she untied her stained apron for what she suspected would be the very last time. The words, "You're fired," still echoed sharply in her ears, delivered with the same cold, clinical efficiency her manager was notoriously known for. That was how briefly she'd been employed at Café Luna before her carefully constructed world began to crumble around her. "I told you, Nova," Marcus had said, not even bothering to look up from the clipboard he was meticulously studying. "Reliability is paramount in this business. You simply can't disappear for 2 hours and expect—" "I was helping someone who could have died," she interjected, her voice barely containing the rising tide of her frustration. "There was blood everywhere and I couldn't just—" "Not my problem," he shrugged dismissively, already turning away to attend to other matters. "Clean out your locker." Now, trudging through the rain-slicked streets of downtown Los Angeles, Nova felt the all-too-familiar weight of desperation settling heavily upon her shoulders. Rent was due in exactly 1 week. Ethan desperately needed new shoes, his current pair practically falling apart. The ominous electricity bill sat unopened on her kitchen counter, the final notice a terrifying specter she was afraid to confront. Her phone vibrated insistently. It was a text message from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Mijo, Ethan is asking when you're coming home. Should I give him dinner?" Nova closed her eyes tightly, leaning heavily against the graffiti-covered bus stop, fighting back tears. At only 5 years old, Ethan was far too young to fully comprehend why his mommy sometimes cried, why they were constantly moving from one cramped apartment to another, why she was forced to work 3 exhausting jobs and still couldn't afford even the simplest toys that the other children at the playground seemed to take for granted. He just knew, with a child's unwavering faith, that she loved him unconditionally, and somehow, miraculously, that had been enough, at least until now. The rain intensified, and Nova pulled her threadbare jacket more tightly around her shivering frame. She was just about to call Mrs. Rodriguez back when a sleek, black SUV pulled up smoothly beside her. The tinted window glided down, revealing a man impeccably dressed in an expensive suit. Not the driver, but someone who clearly didn't belong in this rundown neighborhood. "Nova Delgado?" His voice was smooth, professional, almost unnervingly so. Every single instinct screamed immediate danger. "Who's asking?" "Mr. Stone would like to speak with you." The name hit her with the force of an Arctic blast. Stone. The man from the accident. She vaguely recalled the paramedics using his name. But how on earth had he found her? And more disturbingly, how did he know exactly where to find her? "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, instinctively taking a step backward, trying to put some distance between herself and the unnerving stranger. The man's expression softened ever so slightly. "Miss Delgado, Mr. Stone is immensely grateful for what you did yesterday. He would simply like to thank you properly and, perhaps, discuss a business proposition." Business proposition? Nova's laugh was laced with bitter irony. "Look at me. What possible kind of business could I possibly have with someone who rides around in cars like this? The kind that might solve some of your current difficulties." The carefully chosen words hung heavily in the air between them. He knew. Somehow, this complete stranger knew about her lost job, her mounting financial problems, her palpable desperation. The rational thing to do would be to simply walk away, to disappear back into the anonymous crowd and never look back. But Ethan's sweet, innocent face flashed vividly in her mind, his persistent cough from the previous night, the way he instinctively tried to stifle it so she wouldn't worry, the ridiculously expensive asthma medication that cost more than she earned in an entire week. "Where?" she heard herself ask, the word barely a whisper. "Mr. Stone's residence. It's not far." Nova glanced at the luxurious SUV, then down at her own reflection shimmering in the rain puddle at her feet. A woman with no job, no prospects, and a 5-year-old son who deserved so much better than the hand she had been dealt. "I need to make a phone call first," she said, her voice regaining a measure of its former strength. The man nodded in silent agreement. "Of course." As Nova dialed Mrs. Rodriguez's number, a wave of trepidation washed over her. She couldn't help but wonder if she was about to make the single biggest mistake of her entire life, or the fateful decision that would ultimately save them both. 20 minutes later, the SUV turned smoothly through massive, ornate iron gates, and Nova's breath caught sharply in her throat. The imposing mansion that rose majestically before them looked like something ripped straight from the silver screen, all gleaming glass and cold, unforgiving stone and impossibly sharp angles, perched precariously on a hillside that overlooked the entirety of the sprawling city below. This wasn't simply wealth. This was unadulterated power. "Miss Delgado," the man said politely as they came to a smooth stop at the grand front entrance. "A word of advice. Mr. Stone is particularly sensitive to honesty. Whatever chain of events brought you to that particular street corner yesterday, whatever you might be running from, he will inevitably find out. The only real question is whether you choose to tell him first." Nova's heart hammered relentlessly against her ribs as she cautiously stepped out of the SUV. Through the enormous windows, she could discern a shadowy figure moving in the distance, tall, broad-shouldered, commanding attention even from afar. Damian Stone was waiting for her, and Nova instinctively knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The imposing front door swung silently open before Nova could even bring herself to knock, revealing a woman in her late 50s with kind, intelligent eyes and an obviously expensive, custom-tailored uniform. "Miss Delgado?" she said warmly, a genuine smile gracing her lips. "I'm Maria, Mr. Stone's housekeeper. He's expecting you in his study." Nova wordlessly followed Maria through seemingly endless hallways, past priceless works of art that probably cost more than she would earn in her entire lifetime. Everything was meticulously pristine, breathtakingly elegant, and utterly intimidating. She felt acutely out of place, like a trespasser, in her rain-dampened clothes and scuffed, worn-out shoes. "Don't be nervous, Mija," Maria whispered reassuringly as they approached a set of heavy, intricately carved wooden doors. "He's not what people think." Before Nova could even formulate a question, the doors swung inward. Damian Stone stood imperiously behind a massive, antique desk, and Nova's breath caught in her throat once more. Yesterday, covered in blood and rain, he had seemed almost human, dare she say vulnerable. Today, impeccably dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, he looked precisely like what he was, undeniably dangerous. "Miss Delgado." His voice was even deeper than she remembered, laced with a subtle edge that made her skin prickle uncomfortably. Please have a seat. She remained standing, rooted to the spot. I can't stay long. My son, Ethan. The name seemed to stop him cold. 5 years old. Esma. Lives with you in a one-bedroom apartment on Maple Street. Currently staying with Mrs. Rodriguez while you look for new employment. The color completely drained from Nova's face. How do you know? Damien smoothly moved around the expansive desk, and she noticed, for the first time, the slight stiffness in his movements, the small bandage discreetly placed at his temple. Miss Delgado, you saved my life yesterday. Did you honestly think I wouldn't want to know who my guardian angel was? I'm not an angel, Nova said quickly, almost defensively. I couldn't leave you there. No, you couldn't. His gray eyes studied her with an unnerving intensity that made her want to turn and run. Even though you knew you'd be late for work, even though you knew what it might cost you, you stayed. Anyone would have. No. His voice cut through her weak protest. They wouldn't. In my experience, people only help when there's something in it for them. But you. He paused, something flickering in his expression. You asked for nothing, expected nothing. You just stayed. The silence stretched tautly between them, heavy with an unspoken tension that Nova couldn't quite decipher. Finally, Damien returned to his imposing desk, smoothly pulling out a thick folder. I have a proposition for you, Miss Delgado. I told your driver, I don't know what kind of business. I need a housekeeper. The words were simple, direct, devoid of any pretense. Someone to manage the household staff, oversee meals, handle the day-to-day operations of this place. The position comes with a substantial salary, full benefits, and, he paused deliberately, carefully watching her reaction. Living quarters, a private wing of the house, fully furnished, perfectly suited for a mother and child. Nova's legs suddenly felt weak, threatening to buckle beneath her. What's the catch? Catch? Men like you don't just hand out dream jobs to waitresses they barely know. What do you really want? For the first time since she had entered the room, Damien's lips curved into something that might have resembled a genuine smile. Men like me, rich, powerful, dangerous. The last word seemed to slip out before she could consciously stop it. The temperature in the opulent room seemed to drop a solid 10 degrees. Damien's eyes went cold, predatory. Dangerous. Nova lifted her chin defiantly, refusing to back down, refusing to show him how truly terrified she was. I'm not stupid, Mr. Stone. This house, your security, the way people look at you, you're not just some businessman. And that frightens you. Everything frightens me, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But my son needs medicine, and I desperately need a job, and right now you're offering both. So, you'll take the position, despite your concerns about my character? Nova thought of Ethan, of the unopened electricity bill, of the gnawing emptiness in her stomach that she had endured for the past 2 days so he could have enough to eat. What are the terms? 6-month trial period, salary of $8,000 a month, plus full benefits. You and Ethan move in immediately. You'll have Sundays off, and Maria will help you adjust to the household routines. $8,000 a month. Nova had never even seen that much money in her entire life. And what happens after 6 months? If we're both satisfied with the arrangement, we discuss making it permanent. And if we're not, Damien's expression remained unreadable. Then you leave, with a generous severance package and excellent references. It sounded too good to be true, simply had to be. But as Nova looked around the lavishly decorated study, she reluctantly realized that she was completely out of options. And maybe, just maybe, this was the life-altering break she had been desperately praying for. I'll need to see the living quarters first, she said, her voice firm despite her racing pulse. And meet the other staff. And I want it in writing that Ethan's safety and well-being are absolutely guaranteed. Of course. Damien smoothly pressed a button on his desk. Maria will show you around. Take your time. Decide. As Nova turned to leave, his voice stopped her once more. Miss Delgado, for what it's worth, I don't make offers I don't intend to honor. She looked back at him, at this enigmatic man who could apparently solve all of her overwhelming problems with a mere signature. And I don't make decisions I can't live with. Good, Damien said softly, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Neither do I. But as Maria gently led her from the room, Nova couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was about to discover exactly what living with Damien Stone truly meant. 3 days later, Nova stood in the impeccably clean kitchen of Damien Stone's mansion at 6 o'clock in the morning, struggling to fully comprehend how her life had undergone such a dramatic transformation in such a short period of time. The living quarters he had shown her were significantly larger than any place she had ever lived, even dreamed of living. 2 spacious bedrooms, a comfortable sitting area, a bathroom with a luxurious tub Ethan could practically swim in. When she had brought him home from Mrs. Rodriguez's, his eyes had widened with pure, unadulterated wonder. "Mommy, is this really ours?" he had whispered, running his small, hesitant hands over the plush, velvety couch, the thick, soft carpet, the brand-new toys that had mysteriously appeared in his new bedroom. "For now, baby," she'd said cautiously, not wanting to make any promises she might not be able to keep. But Ethan had already claimed it as his home, and seeing him sleep peacefully for the first time in months, without the telltale wheezing cough, in a room with clean, filtered air and a state-of-the-art humidifier, made every single doubt she had ever harbored seem utterly insignificant. "You're up early." Damon's unexpected voice made her jump, the ceramic coffee mug slipping precariously from her grasp. He caught it with lightning-fast reflexes before it could shatter against the pristine tile floor. For a brief, suspended moment, they stood frozen, his hand covering hers on the warm mug, his body close enough that she could distinctly smell his intoxicating cologne. Expensive, masculine, undeniably dangerous. "I wanted to start breakfast before," Nova began, but the carefully chosen words died in her throat as she looked up into his intense eyes. He was staring at her with an unnerving focus that made her pulse race erratically, his thumb unconsciously stroking across her knuckles. The kitchen, massive as it was, suddenly felt far too small, far too intimate. "Before what?" His voice was noticeably rougher than usual. "Before you left for work," she finished lamely, instinctively stepping back, breaking the physical contact. The loss of his touch felt like a blast of cold air rushing in. "I don't usually eat breakfast." "You should." The words came out with more force than she had intended. "You're still recovering from the accident, and your body needs." She stopped abruptly, realizing how presumptuous she sounded. "I'm sorry. It's not my place to." "It is." Damien set the mug down carefully on the granite countertop, his eyes never leaving her face. "You're in charge of this household now, Nova. That includes making sure I eat." The way he said her name sent shivers down her spine. Not Miss Delgado like he had in his study, but simply Nova. As if it actually meant something to him. "What do you like?" she asked, moving quickly toward the massive stainless steel refrigerator, instinctively trying to put some distance between them. "Surprise me." As Nova began pulling various ingredients from the impressively stocked refrigerator, she was acutely aware of Damien watching her every movement. He had settled casually onto one of the bar stools, coffee mug in hand, looking completely at ease and in control in his own kitchen. But there was something inherently predatory in his stillness, like a sleek panther carefully deciding whether or not to pounce. "Tell me about Ethan's father," he said suddenly, the unexpected question hitting her like a physical blow. Nova's hands stilled on the carton of eggs. "What? You wear no ring. There are no photos of a man among your belongings, but Ethan undeniably exists. Which means, it's none of your business." The words came out sharper than she had intended. "Everything in this house is my business now, Nova." She turned to face him, anger flaring in her chest. "My son is not a thing you own just because you gave me a job." "No," Damien agreed, his voice dangerously quiet. "But his safety is my responsibility now. And yours too. And I can't protect what I don't understand." "Protect from what?" "From whoever might want to hurt me by hurting the people I care about." The loaded words hung heavily in the air between them. people I care about. Nova's heart hammered relentlessly against her ribs. You don't even know me, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I know enough. Damien stood, moving toward her with that fluid, graceful stride that spoke of carefully contained violence. I know you're brave enough to save a stranger. I know you love your son more than your own life. I know you're proud enough to question my motives, even when you desperately need what I'm offering. He stopped mere inches from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back slightly to meet his intense gaze. And I know, he continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, that you feel this too. Feel what? But even as she asked the question, Nova knew exactly what he meant. The undeniable electricity that sparked whenever he was near, the way her breath caught involuntarily when he looked at her, the dangerous, irresistible pull toward a man who could utterly destroy her with a single word. Mommy! Ethan's sleepy voice from the doorway shattered the charged moment. Nova spun around, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Hey, baby, you're up early. Ethan padded sleepily into the kitchen in his brand-new pajamas, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. I heard voices. Are you making breakfast? I am. Nova's voice was steadier than she actually felt. Why don't you sit here while Who's that? Ethan had finally spotted Damien, who had discreetly moved back to give them some space. This is Mr. Stone, Nova said carefully, watching both of their reactions. He's my boss. We're staying in his house now, remember? Ethan studied Damien with the frank, uninhibited curiosity that only a 5-year-old could possess. You're really tall. You're really observant, Damien replied, and Nova was genuinely surprised by the unexpected gentleness in his voice. Mommy says I get that from my daddy, Ethan said matter-of-factly. But I never met him. He left before I was born. Nova's face burned with shame and embarrassment, but Damon's expression didn't change, remaining carefully neutral. That was his loss, he said simply, his gaze unwavering. Ethan beamed. That's what Mommy says, too. Can I have pancakes? Pancakes coming right up, Nova said quickly, desperate to change the uncomfortable subject. As she busied herself cooking, she was acutely aware of Damien watching the interaction between her and Ethan, the way she automatically cut his pancakes into small, manageable pieces, how she gently reminded him to use his inhaler, the quiet, patient way she corrected his table manners. When Ethan enthusiastically asked if he could explore the expansive backyard after breakfast, Damon surprised them both. I'll show you around, he offered. There's a pool and beautiful gardens, and maybe even some horses. Really? Ethan's eyes went wide with excitement. Mommy, can I? Nova hesitated for a brief moment. The idea of her son alone with Damien Stone should have terrified her, should have sent alarm bells ringing in her head. Instead, she found herself nodding in hesitant agreement. Just for a little while, and you have to promise to stay where Mr. Stone can see you. I promise. Ethan bounced excitedly in his seat. This is the best house ever. As they headed outside, hand in hand, Nova heard Damien's phone ring. His voice changed instantly, becoming cold, authoritative, almost unrecognizable. What do you mean missing? Pregnant pause. Find him now. And Marcus, if anyone even touches what's mine, they'll wish they'd never been born. The call ended abruptly, and Nova felt a chill run down her spine, like ice water in her veins. This was the man she had brought her son to live with, the man whose house they now called home, the man who was starting to look at her like she, too, belonged to him. Through the window, she watched Damien kneel down to Ethan's level, patiently pointing out the different flowers in the meticulously manicured garden. Her son was laughing, completely at ease with this undeniably dangerous stranger, and Nova realized with a growing sense of dread that somewhere between the coffee mug and the pancakes, she had started to feel almost at ease too. That, she realized, was the most terrifying thing of all. The blood-curdling scream shattered Nova's uneasy sleep at precisely 3 o'clock in the morning. She bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs, automatically reaching for Ethan's empty bed before abruptly remembering that they weren't in their cramped, dilapidated apartment anymore. The terrifying sound had clearly come from somewhere else within the sprawling mansion. A woman's voice, high-pitched and utterly desperate. Nova grabbed her robe and ran barefoot toward the main house, her footsteps silent on the cold, unforgiving marble floor. The screaming had abruptly stopped, replaced by hushed, urgent voices. Damien's, low and deadly, and a woman's pleading, frantic tone. "Please, Damien, you have to listen to me. I told you never to come here, Isabella." Nova froze at the top of the grand staircase, instinctively knowing she was intruding on something she shouldn't be witnessing. Through the partially open door of Damien's study, she could see a stunningly beautiful woman with long, raven-black hair and a designer dress that probably cost more than Nova's ancient, beat-up car. Elegant, refined, and clearly absolutely terrified. "He has our daughter." The woman, Isabella, sobbed hysterically. "Victor has Sophia. He says if you don't give him the shipment, he'll hurt her." Damien's voice was like chipped ice. "You mean the daughter you deliberately hid from me for 5 long years? The one you claimed didn't even exist when you happily took his money and disappeared without a trace?" Nova's blood turned to ice in her veins. Damien had a daughter, a 5-year-old daughter just like Ethan. "I was protecting her," Isabella cried, her voice cracking with desperation. "From this life, from what you are, from her father." The words cracked like a whip in the tense silence. "You were protecting her from me? Damien, please, you have to get her out. He'll kill her." The heavy silence that followed was even more terrifying than the initial screaming. Nova pressed herself tightly against the cold, ornate wall, instinctively knowing that she should turn around and leave, that she was hearing things that could potentially get her killed, but she found herself completely unable to move, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. "Marcus." Damien's voice was now deadly calm. "Escort Miss Volov to her car, and make absolutely certain she understands that if she ever sets foot on my property again, it will be the very last thing she ever does." "Damien, you can't just—" "I can do whatever I want. You made that crystal clear 5 years ago when you decided I wasn't worthy of even knowing my own child." Footsteps approached the study door. Nova turned and ran, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would wake Ethan. She made it back to their private quarters just as she heard the heavy front door slam shut with a resounding thud. For the next hour, she lay wide awake in bed, staring blankly up at the ceiling, her mind racing uncontrollably. Damien had a daughter. Someone had brutally kidnapped her. And the woman, Isabella, had deliberately hidden the child from him for 5 long years, just like Nova was currently hiding the truth about Ethan's father. The next morning, Damien was gone before she even woke up. Maria explained, her expression carefully neutral, that he had some urgent business he needed to attend to. But Nova could clearly see the deep worry etched in the older woman's kind eyes, the way the other household staff moved about the mansion like they were cautiously walking on eggshells, acutely aware of the palpable tension in the air. "Mommy, where's Mr. Stone?" Ethan asked innocently over breakfast. "He said he'd show me the horses today. He had to go to work, baby. Maybe later." But later never came. Damien didn't return that night or the next. The mansion felt strangely different without him, eerily empty despite being filled with people. Nova found herself unconsciously listening for his deep, resonant voice, anxiously watching for the arrival of his sleek black car, and hating herself for even caring. On the 3rd day of his absence, she was playing in the garden with Ethan when the black SUVs suddenly arrived. 3 of them moving at a dangerously high speed up the circular driveway. Nova instinctively grabbed Ethan's small hand, pulling him quickly behind one of the large, ornate planters as a group of menacing-looking men in expensive suits poured out of the vehicles. They moved with a frightening military precision, immediately surrounding the house, meticulously checking all the windows and doors. "Mommy?" Ethan whispered, sensing her growing fear. "What's happening?" "Shh, baby, just stay quiet and don't move." Through the meticulously landscaped garden, she could see another group of men approaching. These ones were different, rougher, more dangerous looking, with visible weapons strapped to their sides. Definitely not Damien's people. Someone else's. Her phone suddenly vibrated insistently. A text message from an unknown number. Bring the boy to the front gate now, or everyone in that house dies. Nova's blood ran cold. They knew about Ethan. Somehow they knew. Another text message arrived immediately. You have 5 minutes. Mommy, I'm scared. Ethan whimpered, clutching her hand tightly. Nova looked down at her son. Her beautiful, innocent son, who had absolutely nothing to do with this dangerous world of violence and long-held secrets. Then she looked toward the imposing house, where Maria and the other unsuspecting staff members were likely going about their daily routines, completely unaware of the imminent danger surrounding them. She thought of Damien, wherever he was at that moment, and the kidnapped daughter he was desperately trying to save. And she made a split-second decision that would irrevocably change everything. Ethan, she whispered urgently, quickly pulling out her own cell phone. I need you to run to the house and find Maria. Tell her to call Mr. Stone and say, the wolves are at the door. Can you remember that? The wolves are at the door. But, Mommy? Go now. Run as fast as you can, and don't look back. As Ethan bravely ran toward the house, Nova stood up, walking slowly and deliberately toward the front gate, her heart pounding in her chest. Her hands were visibly shaking, but her voice was surprisingly steady when she called out, I'm here, but the boy stays in the house. A tall man stepped forward, blonde and imposing with cold, piercing blue eyes and a chilling smile that made her skin crawl. Miss Delgado, he said smoothly, his accent thick and vaguely European. Victor Kossoff, I believe we need to talk. As the ornate gates swung slowly open and menacing hands reached out to grab her, Nova's last fleeting thought was a silent prayer that Damien would come home in time to save his real family. She just desperately hoped that he would also remember to save hers, too. The dilapidated warehouse reeked of stale rust and palpable fear. Nova's wrists throbbed from the tight plastic zip ties, but she forced herself to remain calm, pushing back the rising tide of panic. Across the cavernous concrete floor, she could see another chair eerily empty, but with restraints that looked like they had been used quite recently. You're wondering about the other chair? Victor Kossoff said, his voice smooth and devoid of any emotion, as if he were simply commenting on the weather. He was undeniably handsome in a cold, sharp way, like an expensive knife designed to look deceptively pretty before it brutally cut you. That's where Damien's daughter was sitting until an hour ago. Nova's heart lurched violently in her chest. What did you do to her? Nothing yet. Victor circled her chair like some kind of predator sizing up its prey. But everything hinged on how cooperative Mr. Stone decided to be. I don't understand what any of this has to do with me. I'm just his housekeeper. Victor erupted in laughter, the sound bouncing off the cold, cavernous warehouse walls. Just his housekeeper. Miss Delgado, you've been living in his house for less than a week, and he's already moved you into the family wing. His security detail has been expanded to include protection for you and your son. Men like Damien Stone don't make those kinds of arrangements for the hired help. You're wrong. Am I, though? Victor pulled out his phone, displaying a photo that sent a shiver of ice through her veins. It was a picture of her and Damien in the kitchen 3 days earlier. The moment he'd caught her coffee mug, when they'd stood so close she could feel the steady thrum of his heartbeat. He looks at you the way a man looks at something he wants to keep safe, something he treasures. The warehouse door was suddenly flung open, and Nova's heart leaped with a surge of hope as Damien strode in, flanked by 6 men in black tactical gear. But her relief quickly dissolved when she saw the look on his face. Cold, controlled, and radiating lethal intent. Victor. His voice was a low growl that could have shattered glass. You've made a mistake. Have I? Victor moved behind Nova's chair, his hand settling possessively on her shoulder in a gesture that made her skin crawl. I don't think so. You see, I've learned something very interesting about your new employee. Damien's eyes flicked to Nova, and she caught a fleeting expression flash across his face. Concern, anger, something deeper, something unreadable. Let her go, Victor. Your quarrel is with me. Oh, but she's so much more interesting than I initially thought. Victor's fingers tightened on Nova's shoulder, his grip becoming painful. Tell him, Miss Delgado. Tell him about Ethan's father. Nova's world tilted on its axis, everything feeling off-kilter. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Victor leaned down, his breath hot and unpleasant against her ear. Tell him about that one night 5 years ago. Tell him about the man you met at that charity gala where you were working as a server. The man who was so drunk, he didn't even remember your name the next morning. Stop, Nova whispered, her voice barely audible. But Victor continued relentlessly, his voice a cruel weapon. Tell him about the DNA test you had done last month when you finally saved enough money. The one that confirmed what you'd suspected all along. Damien had gone completely still, his face a rigid mask of ice and fury. What is he talking about, Nova? Nova looked at the man who had given her a job, a home, a chance at a better life. The man whose daughter was missing because of her. I can't. Then I'll tell him, Victor said cheerfully, his voice dripping with malicious glee. Ethan isn't just any 5-year-old boy, Damien. He's your 5-year-old boy, your son. The son she's been hiding from you, just like Isabella hid Sophia. The silence that followed was deafening, heavy and suffocating. Nova watched as realization dawned in Damien's eyes, followed by a wave of something that looked like betrayal, a raw and painful emotion. Is it true? His voice was barely human, a strained whisper. Nova closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face, unable to meet his gaze. Yes, he knew. It wasn't a question, but a statement, heavy with accusation. All this time you knew, and you said nothing. I was protecting him from you. The words were flat, devoid of emotion, dead. Like Isabella, like every woman who's ever claimed to love me, you were protecting him from his own father. Damien, please, Victor interrupted, cutting her off with a dismissive wave of his hand. But we have business to conclude. The shipment, Damien, in exchange for both your children. Both? Nova's head snapped up, her eyes wide with horror. Victor smiled, a cruel and predatory expression. Oh yes, my dear. Your son is here too. My men collected him from the house after you so helpfully led them away from him. He's with Sophia now in a much less comfortable location. Damien's carefully constructed control finally cracked, the facade crumbling to reveal the rage beneath. If you've hurt them, they're unharmed for now. But children are so fragile, aren't they? So easy to break. The rage that crossed Damien's face was terrifying, a primal force of nature. Nova had never seen anything like it. Pure, murderous fury barely contained by sheer force of will. The shipment, Victor continued, pressing his advantage. In exchange for your son and daughter, you have 1 hour. Done, Damien said immediately, his voice firm despite the barely suppressed fury raging within him. But I want proof of life first. Victor nodded to one of his men, who brought over a tablet. The screen displayed a small, bare room where 2 children sat huddled together. A little girl with dark hair and Damien's piercing gray eyes, and Ethan, his arm protectively around her as she cried. Sophia? Damien breathed, and Nova heard 5 years of agonizing loss and desperate love contained in that single word. They're scared but unharmed, Victor said, his voice laced with a threat. Let's keep it that way. As Victor's men prepared to move them to the exchange location, Nova caught Damien's eye, her heart heavy with guilt and remorse. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm so sorry. For a fleeting moment, his mask slipped, and she saw the raw pain and vulnerability underneath. So am I, he said quietly, his voice filled with a profound sadness. For all of it. The exchange took place at midnight on the docks, the air thick with tension. Nova watched from inside Victor's car as Damien's men unloaded crate after crate from a truck while Victor's people meticulously verified the contents. The tension was so thick it felt like a physical presence. Satisfied? Damien called out, his voice cutting through the night. Almost, Victor replied. He stepped out of the car, dragging Nova with him, his grip tight and painful. But I think we need to discuss the terms of our future relationship. There is no future relationship. You have what you wanted. Do I? Victor pressed a gun to Nova's temple, the cold metal a stark reminder of the danger she was in. Because I'm thinking that having leverage over the great Damien Stone might be more valuable than any shipment. That's when Nova saw it. The almost imperceptible hand signal Damien gave to his men. The subtle shift in their positions. A silent ballet of deadly intent. You know what I think, Victor? Damien's voice was conversational, almost friendly. A stark contrast to the lethal glint in his eyes. I think you made a fundamental error in judgment. Oh, and what's that? Damien smiled. A terrifyingly beautiful expression that sent a chill down Nova's spine. You touched what's mine. The next 30 seconds were pure chaos. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions as Damien's men, who had apparently been in position for hours, unleashed a coordinated attack. Victor's grip on Nova loosened as he spun around to face the sudden threat, and she threw herself to the ground, instinctively seeking cover. When the shooting stopped, Victor lay motionless on the ground, dead, and Damien was already running toward a nearby shipping container where muffled cries could be heard. The door burst open, and Ethan flew into Nova's arms, clinging to her tightly, followed by a little girl who launched herself at Damien with a sob of, "Daddy, are you hurt?" Damien asked, his hands gently checking Sophia for injuries. His movements swift and efficient even as his eyes scanned Nova and Ethan. "Either of you." "We're okay," Nova said, holding Ethan close, her voice trembling with relief. "We're okay." For a moment, they stood there in the aftermath, a tableau of survival. 2 parents, 2 children, surrounded by the wreckage of violence and shattered secrets. "Mommy," Ethan said, looking back and forth between Nova and Damien, his brow furrowed with confusion. "Is he really my daddy?" Nova looked at Damien, seeing her own fear and uncertainty reflected in his eyes. "Yes, baby, he is." "Cool," Ethan said matter-of-factly, accepting the information with a child's simple trust. "Does this mean we get to keep the horses?" Despite everything, Damien laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy that filled the tense air. "Yeah, kid, you get to keep the horses." As they walked back to the cars, Sophia's hands securely clasped in Damien's, and Ethan walking between them, Nova felt something shift in the atmosphere. The secrets were finally out in the open, the immediate danger was over, but the hardest part, learning to be a family, was just beginning. "Nova," Damien said quietly as they reached the car, his voice filled with a mix of emotions. "We need to talk." "I know," she said, bracing herself for the inevitable conversation, the unburdening of years of secrets and unspoken truths. "About everything." "Everything," he agreed, his gaze intense and unwavering. Then, so softly she almost missed it, he added, "You belong to me now, both of you, and I protect what's mine." As they drove home through the glittering lights of the Los Angeles night, Nova realized that sometimes the most dangerous thing wasn't falling for the wrong man. Sometimes it was falling for the right one, the one who challenged you, who saw you, who claimed you, and who made you confront the deepest parts of yourself. Years later, Nova woke to the sound of laughter echoing from the garden below, a symphony of pure, unadulterated joy. Through the bedroom window, she could see Damien chasing Ethan and Sophia around the pool, all 3 of them soaking wet and grinning, their faces radiant with happiness. At 8 and 7, respectively, the children had formed an unbreakable bond, partners in crime who could reduce their powerful father to a puddle of affection with a single coordinated assault of hugs and pleading eyes. "You're watching them again." Damien's voice came from behind her, warm and familiar, as strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. "When did you sneak back in?" she asked, leaning into his comforting warmth, savoring the feel of his body against hers. "When you were lost in thought, completely oblivious to the world around you," he teased gently. "Penny for them?" Nova smiled, placing her hands over his, feeling the strength and security they represented. "Just thinking about how different everything is now." "Different? How?" "I used to be afraid of not having enough. she said, her voice soft with reflection. Enough money, enough food, enough security for Ethan. Now I'm afraid of having too much happiness. Like it might disappear if I'm not careful. Like I don't deserve it. Damien turned her in his arms, his piercing gray eyes serious and filled with unwavering love. It's not going anywhere, Nova. We're not going anywhere. This is it. Promise. Instead of answering with words, he kissed her. A soft, deep, lingering kiss that was full of the love that had grown between them, nurtured through honesty, patience, and time, and the daily conscious choice to build something beautiful and lasting from the wreckage of their pasts. Mommy, Daddy, Sophia's voice carried up from the garden, interrupting their moment of intimacy. Ethan says you're being gross again. We're not being gross, Nova called back, laughing, unable to suppress her amusement. Yes, you are, Ethan shouted, his voice filled with mock disgust. Come swimming. The water's perfect. In a minute, Damien replied, his arms tightening protectively around Nova, unwilling to relinquish her embrace. We should go down, she said, her voice a husky whisper, not moving, content to stay right where she was. We should, he agreed, not releasing her, his eyes filled with a love that mirrored her own. They'd been married for 2 years now, but Nova still sometimes marveled at the life they'd built together, a testament to their resilience and unwavering commitment. Damien had gradually stepped back from the darker aspects of his business, delegating responsibilities and focusing on the legitimate enterprises that had always been his ultimate goal, leaving the shadows behind him. The children attended the best schools, had access to the best medical care, wanted for nothing, but more importantly, they were loved, protected, and cherished, surrounded by an atmosphere of warmth and security. I have something for you, Damien said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box, his eyes sparkling with affection. It's not my birthday, Nova protested playfully, even as her heart fluttered with anticipation. It's the anniversary of the day you saved my life, he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate necklace with a pendant shaped like a star, its facets catching the light. 5 years ago today, you stopped on a rainy street to help a stranger. You changed everything. Nova's eyes filled with tears, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. Damien gently fastened the necklace around her throat, his fingers brushing against her skin. I love you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I love you, too, he said, his voice filled with a deep and abiding love. Both of you, all of you, my family. Daddy, Mommy, are you coming or not? Sophia's impatient voice, filled with the boundless energy of childhood, made them both laugh. Coming! They called in unison, their voices echoing with happiness. As they headed downstairs, hand in hand, Nova caught sight of their reflection in the hallway mirror. Damien in swim trunks and a t-shirt, his dark hair still damp from the pool, and herself in a simple sundress, the star necklace gleaming softly against her skin. They looked like any normal family heading out for an afternoon swim, an everyday scene of domestic bliss. And maybe that's exactly what they were now, a testament to the transformative power of love and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Race you to the pool, Damien said with a mischievous grin that made him look years younger, his eyes sparkling with playful challenge. You're on, Nova replied, her heart light with joy, taking off at a run, her laughter echoing through the house. Behind them, the house stood solid and beautiful in the California sunshine, its walls holding countless memories. No longer just a mansion, but a home, filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering commitment of its inhabitants. A place where a former waitress and a reformed crime boss had learned that love wasn't about perfection, but about choosing each other every single day, about forgiveness, acceptance, and building something beautiful and worth protecting from the ashes of their past. As Nova hit the water with a splash, surrounded by the delighted laughter of her children and the unwavering love of her husband, she realized she'd finally found what she'd been searching for all along. She'd found her place in the world, and it was right here, in the arms of the most dangerous man in Los Angeles, who had turned out to be the safest place she'd ever known.